March something.
March 2nd.
Today is March 2nd, 2019. And you, audience, are witnessing history, the very first ever video with David Shindoll and David Steele. And today's topic is
Observations.
Observations. So, David, what inspired you? Because the observations were your idea. What inspired you to want to talk about observations?
I really am excited about this topic because of how much leverage, how much power making a true observation gives me to access like a direct access to life, a direct experience of life. And so I really want to explore this more and learn more about it. Because in NVC, often it's said that the needs is like the heart of nonviolent communication. Mm-hmm. But if you can't access needs, then you can't access that richness of connection. And so for me, observations are that kind of pathway of really encountering ourselves and other people.
So if you can't notice your needs, then how are you going to fill them?
Exactly.
And I certainly know several times when I've done classes, I've had people say, wow, I didn't even know I had needs. So what I'm hearing you say is learning how to observe is critical for being able to commune with, to discover, to notice what your needs are.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And for me, it's really, like where the observations come from, I think is a critical aspect. Because I can fool myself and it's really subtle to think that I'm observing something, but really it's kind of in the service of some story that I have or some idea that I have.
What do you mean by some story that you have? I mean, what are observations?
Sure.
What do you mean by it's subtle and in some story?
So we'll just start at the basic level, which is basically observations are just what you could observe with a video camera with sound and that had smell and other senses, if such a thing existed. But basically our perceptions. And then the story comes in when we start to think about those perceptions, when we start to add something on.
Right. So what if I'm watching someone and I'm observing what they're doing and it's obvious they're being a jerk?
Mm-hmm.
That's my observation. That person is being inconsiderate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just noticing in my body right now what happens when I hear those words. Uh-huh. And so I notice tension in my body and I notice just kind of a constriction happening. And there's nothing wrong with those words, but it's noticing the direct impact. And I think that's the subtle part for me, is that often that tension is uncomfortable and we want to kind of move away from it. And one of my yoga teachers, Casey, let's say we're talking this month about satya, which is true, and how I loved how she put it, when you're not trying to add anything or subtract anything from your experience. And I just love the simplicity of that because it really fits on what presence is. You're allowing things to be just as they are. I take that experience and I see the tension, and then I become curious about it. And so I'm not sure if that's completely responding to your question.
What I'm noticing is when I made my statement and you started talking about it, you immediately went to your body. Mm-hmm. And describe what was going on in your body. Say more about that. Mm-hmm. And we're going to I'm keeping track of the other part of the question, so I'll circle back to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that another one of our trainers, Nikki Kashnan, said that I really like is that observations liberate us from our stories. And so when I'm able, it's kind of like I'm using my mind, this wonderful gift I've been given, to actually start to when I observe my sensations, I notice that I'm in the present moment right now. It naturally brings me to the present moment. When I'm in my story, that, he's being a jerk has lots of past elements to it. I've been treated like that before. I'm not going to fall for this again. I have to, so notice how it's past and future oriented when I start making judgments. And they're also just by the nature of them, are very black and white. And so, and the world isn't that way. It's a lot more complex. There's a lot more nuance.
So two things I get out of what you're saying. One is observations bring us present, that when we're observing, there's really no past and no future. There's simply what's happening now. Mm-hmm. But then you threw me for a loop when you added the word judgments. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure where that comes in if you're talking about being present. So judgments and story, those are two words that I'm not sure what you mean by them.
Mm-hmm. The judgment, to just make that distinction, is, as I was kind of saying before, I have a bodily direct experience with life, and then my judgment or my story is what I think about that tension. And so it's my evaluation. I kind of evaluate my experience instead of just being with it and then letting that experience reveal to me something that's true.
Isn't that key to our survival? The ability to think about what's going on and judge it. If that car's coming towards me, I better get out of the way.
Yeah, without a doubt. And so here I would just make the distinction here between, I think it gives me more access to things that keep me safe. When let's say a person just walking down the street, this really happened. Middle of the night, and I'm with my wife, and so there might be a judgment there about safety. I'm not moralistically judging the person as, guy who is unsafe, but I'm going to make a value judgment about care for, my safety or my wife's safety and move to the other side of the street, so I still can have those. It's the same action, but it comes from a different place.
Right.
Yeah.
So, if I say, if I notice and like there's a little bit of a dryness in my throat and a little bit of warmth in my belly, and then this voice comes on in my head and it says I want some more coffee. And then I say, oh, that's good. I enjoyed that. Mm-hmm. So what's the judgment? What's the observation?
Well, the observation would be just that sensation, that kind of delight that comes, the smile and the warmth, and just kind of like the relief. I'm really feeling that sensation. And maybe a judgment or story is like, oh my God, I can't do without coffee. I would die without this coffee.
But that's so true.
Yeah, I used to think that I couldn't, do without it, and and you experiment, right? So right. I know that's kind of too crazy.
But so talk about story. You use the word story a lot.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that?
I'm just noticing how, just kind of thinking energy-wise, and our expenditure of energy goes. And I'll give an example of a movie I just saw, which was Free Solo, about the guy who climbed up like a 3,000-foot El Capitan without any ropes.
Right.
And I was really impressed with a couple of things. And one of them was that, like, when he was, there was such an intimate knowledge of that rock. And that came through observation. And when he was on the rock, he had to have a practice of dealing with fear. and dealing with emotions and stories and all of this stuff. Because when you're on that face and it's life and death, there is no room for anything that will take your energy away from the task at hand, which is staying alive. And so I'm just noticing that quality of stories is that they take us outside of presence, where we actually have power and where the actual, possibility resides. And so, he's not thinking about his stardom or things like that, because that energy would take him away from the present moment. And I'm curious what goes on for you when you hear that.
Okay. That's a great question. And so partly as you started talking, I was having this thought, like I've kind of been interrogating you or interviewing you. Mm-hmm. And maybe we should turn the tables and you should ask me some questions.
Exactly.
You asked me a question.
Yes. That's what I was hoping this would be, actually.
So the what goes on for me when I hear that? Well, what really went on for me is staying alive is job one for us humans. So much of what we do is about staying alive. And when you talk about coming into the present moment and how observations bring us into the present moment, I think that puts us in direct connection with life, because that's where life lives, is in the present moment. And when we move out of the present moment and are paying a lot of attention to the descriptions that we're carrying about what's going on, and then the possibilities or the meanings in those descriptions and stuff, we can forget, in my opinion, we can forget we're alive. And so then it becomes easy to procrastinate or to put off an uncomfortable task or to take a risk in an emotion, in a relationship, because, I can always do that later. And when we get in touch with the fact that there might not be a later, I think it gives us courage. So I like when you're talking about the present moment. That's what really went on in my mind. I remember a friend of mine talking about that, how this epiphany that he had when we were backpacking. He'd gone on, he was hiking by himself. Actually, he'd come up before me for 2 days on the ground. And he said he had this amazing thing where he'd gotten in this situation where he was in this ledge, or in this ravine between two ledges, and it was a long way down. Like, you slip, you die. And he was feeling his way through, and in the meanwhile, in his mind, he is talking about, things that his parents didn't do right and shortcomings of his upbringing. And he started to slip, and he almost fell. And his heart was, on his breath. And then he said, he realized, here I am in this life and death situation where paying attention really matters. Why am I going and running this story in my head about my parents that has no relative, it's not pertinent to me staying alive in this moment. And it was a life-changing experience for me. So that's really kind of what went on, and I think it diverges a little bit. I mean, the needs and stuff, it diverges from that a little bit. But when people start talking about being present, how observations bring us present, there's a resonance in my body that wants to embrace that. So, how was that?
I love that. I love that example because sometimes it is difficult to see that, just these situations. I love that part about, it seems like, oh, well, I'll deal with this later. And actually, those things do turn into really life-changing decisions when we do them over and over and over. And they do matter a lot. So I really love the example. And what else came up for me? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, because so you hit something there. You said they do matter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. Life matters. Don't ask me why, but it matters. And in a way, we're born to care. And so when we're in that present moment and in that observational state, I think it really reminds us that things matter. That what I'm doing has meaning, has significance, which is directly drops you into your needs, because that's what needs are all about, getting in touch with what really matters. And so I think that's the connection between observations and needs from a certain point of view.
Mm-hmm. And now that you said that, I have another connection about observations and maybe needs and if a need for respect is really up for me, often my observations center around that. And so like the observations, the way I see things, the things I pay attention to are kind of focused on that need. And it can often slip into the story of, she doesn't care about me. And then I start to observe all the things that just reinforce that. And because I love to be right about things. And I love, that's the thing about stories is they do give us a sense of security, or there's something like life makes sense. It's really important, for things to fit together.
Yeah.
And so that's what our mind does. And I think that's the power of story. And I was reading some of Sapiens' book. I forgot the author's name, but he was saying that, once you get into a community above like 140 people, you need to have a unifying story to keep people together. And I thought that was very interesting, that, that to give meaning and kind of structure to experience so that we're kind of can have the same kind of understanding about what we're doing. So it serves a really important purpose.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that we're struggling with as a culture right now, is we don't have that unifying story. When everyone watched Walter Cronkite on the news, then we all were more or less working from the same information set. And we could have nuance and difference, but there was a coherence in our communication. And now that there are so many stories, so many descriptions of what's going on, depending on where you're coming from. And often, someone else's description makes absolutely no sense because it doesn't overlap. So bringing that around to observations, I guess, because I see that as one of the defining challenges of our time, that our species is in peril if we can't figure out how to consciously address issues around story and the different perceptions that the stories evoke. And so bringing that back to observations, though, when we go into an observation and we're in the present, for me, when I observe, it's like an inhale. My orientation is silence, so that there's an emptiness in me where the stimulation, the neural information, and the thoughts and feelings I have about that register, kind of like a whiteboard that doesn't have anything on it yet. And then you put the line on it. And when I go into that empty space where I'm just observing, then there's a receptivity to different story. So that when whoever I'm talking to, whatever way they frame stuff, however they describe stuff, it registers in me, and I think in a way similar to how it registers with them, in because I'm coming from this place of silence and emptiness. And thus I can get into rapport with them, and we touch. We are able to then touch on what really matters. And when we touch on what really matters, the story becomes way less important. But it's kind of like the calling card or the peephole in the wind in the front door that you look through before you open it, to help us filter out, keep us safe. But once someone knows and understands their story, then it becomes way less important because of the connection between us. You got me going.
Yeah, good.
So,
so I have two things, and I think I'll say the one that really goes with what you're saying first is I'm very interested in like practice, like very concrete practices, and I'm really enjoying this, you know, the revolutionary aspect of what you're saying. And what would be, you know, like steps, things people could do, or things that you do? I mean, you kind of described it, but I want to really highlight those.
Okay. I will highlight some steps if you'll highlight some steps.
Okay.
So we can do this together.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So I think the fundamental thing I do more than anything else is I pay attention to my breath. I notice whether it's deep or shallow, whether there's ease in my chest or constriction. And then pay attention to what the description in my head, not only to the dictionary definitions of the words, but to the tenor, the tone, the cadence, because the words in my head carry an energy. And so I listen for that energy more than I do for the actual definition of what, you know, the content. So those are two steps. So what do you do?
Yeah, I just before coming here, I have a practice. You know, I know how utterly tragic and painful that judgments can be. I have hurt people deeply because I don't address my judgments, and so I have a practice. I want to really notice when I'm doing it, and what helps me, I find this is something we cultivate in our life. And so I have a practice of when I notice myself judging, if I can, I go to my journal and I notice that just writing, just even the first two sentences, these are my thoughts right here. That creates a certain distance already. It creates a spaciousness because now those words are on a piece of paper. They're away from me and I can see them. And so it's a little bit less likely that I identify with them. And a practice that I got from somebody who does cognitive behavioral therapy, I think that's what it's called, that I really like. It's a thought journal. writing down those thoughts and kind of getting to the core, kind of core beliefs, core thoughts, and then finding observations that are inconsistent with those thoughts. So she doesn't care for me, right? Or I'm unlovable and I am a total failure, right, as a person. Might be like the fundamental core belief there, thought. And then looking at observations that kind of are inconsistent with that. And it's just a practice. It's just a practice about like how to see little by little that, you can kind of make space for these. And I found that through working with observations, nonviolent communication, I actually enjoy being wrong. It's really wonderful. But about these cherished beliefs that I have, that I've had, oh no, we have to do this, in this way, or else I won't be able to move on, and just questioning that, and really like, do I have to? And there's a real liberation and freedom that comes with that. So that's a couple of practices. And then, so I'll stop there. There's a bunch more, but there it is for now.
All right. So I have one of the principles of the teaching we do is transparency. It's really, students really enjoy seeing us when we're in the front of the room, just being transparent, struggling with stuff ourselves. And it invites a closeness. It invites a vulnerability into the room that I find very nourishing. So my question is, we have been talking on this video for a while. How long do we want it to be? Because are we at a good stopping point? Or are we just so engaging that people could listen for another 20 minutes? Because we could easily talk about it.
Yeah.
So
I would like to maybe offer one more thing that's coming to me. So this is kind of also a practice,
right?
And it's something we might end on.
Okay.
So this comes from Paul Johnson, who got it from somewhere else, but it's the curiosity.
Okay.
And I love this. It's so simple and something that you can generally just touch in with what you're curious about in this moment, and then ask the other person. And so you want to play that, and then we'll come to an end.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. So I'm curious about how that idea emerged.
When you were talking about authenticity, that is a pathway to authenticity for me, and I think it's a kind of a fundamental aspect of observations, which it is this curiosity that they come from. And this is another one from my yoga teacher. I love something she said about observations. She said, you can observe with the intention to change or shift something, which is really a way of resisting life. Because you're not allowing what is there to be. Or you can observe in a way that's about discovering, right, and being curious about life. And so I would like to touch into that natural curiosity and see what comes from that. Okay. Yeah. I'm curious about how that's kind of a heady one, but it's not right. That's okay. It's how have observations really shifted for you over the years, and like what's like the big thing that's different for you after having studied all the things you've studied?
There was a time in my life when I would pretend to be all enlightened and impartial, when really I had an agenda that was very, very deeply. And so there was kind of this underlying sarcasm and almost recrimination about some things, with this veneer of impartiality and being above that, that I would wear. And I think the result of that was cynicism. And so I love science, and science is all about observations. So when I heard about Marshall's model, observations, feelings, needs, and requests, it just totally made sense to me, just right off the bat. You know, that observations are really important. And so what shifted, instead of having this underlying judgment veneer, what shifted for me is really the ability to go into that silence that I was talking about and just allow stuff to register in my awareness without, as much as possible. This is an aspirational goal, without pre-filtering, prejudging, contorting, twisting it, to just let it register as it hits my senses in an impartial way as possible. And I used to think I was good at that, and in retrospect, realized that I was not.
It sounds like an experience of trust.
Yeah, you put your... That's exactly what it is. It was learning to trust so that I could relax and simply be present to what is. Takes practice. It's like putting your toe in the water. Oh, I don't know. Should I trust that? I don't know. But you put a toe in a little bit more and a foot. Oh, wow, that's amazing. That feels great. But sure. And then over time, as you trust and discover that there's a support that goes beyond your mind's ability to comprehend it, but it's there, then it's easy to do more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just getting this hit of like just an access to this amazing amount of resources. When, you know, our mind,
Yes.
and thinking mind is one way of accessing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The mind is great at implementing, but it's not so good at inspiring. Once we get the inspiration, then the mind can implement it pretty effectively. So let me check in now, because I'd love to see what I'm curious about. What I'm curious about is how this experience of doing the video has been going, since it's our first time, since we want to release this to the public. That's you. I am just curious about what's present in you right now, what this experience of doing this video has been.
Right now, it's worry a little bit of I'm enjoying this, and I know people have busy lives, and
Right.
So there's kind of a desire to, you know, really want to somehow communicate the beauty of observations in a way that's easy to receive. I think is the thing that's alive in me right now. And there's kind of a worry about, you know, we started this out, truth be told, we didn't plan anything. You know, we sat down in chairs and started talking. And so,
we have a history of improv.
Yeah.
When it comes to trainings and everything.
And so, and, you know, and that's, you know, I have mixed feelings about it, because there's a part of me that would like to make it very succinct and kind of have a plan, and that that might be wonderful too.
Yeah,
maybe we'll do that next time.
That, you know, I'm guessing that having that plan and being succinct then is a way of assuring yourself that what you're doing will have potency and actually make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and also to have that clarity for myself.
Right, have that clarity.
Yeah,
so
because
that's that trust.
A little bit, yes, and it's also about clarity, just in terms of there's the trust, and also about like how to kind of there's something about sharing it that is a skill, and about having that kind of clarity of delivering it.
So really being pragmatic, wanting it to not just be a feel enlightened talk, but actually be something that can really make a difference in people's lives.
Yes. Eminently practical.
Well, eminently practical.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is that a good closing thought?
Yeah. And one of the powers of NVC is requests. So we would love your feedback, because it is our intention to share this more effectively. And we would love feedback about what actually, engaged you, what contributed to you, what didn't. So we can learn.
Comment field below. Also, you can ring the bell and subscribe to our channel, but we would love hearing your comments. Absolutely. Thank you for remembering that.
You're welcome. Check it out.
Yeah.